Senior political analyst, former Republican senator from the great state of Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum, along with Rick Gates, former Trump campaign senior aide. All right, Rick Santorum, this comes on the heels of Democrats' catastrophic autopsy. You got former President Joe Biden essentially erased from the conversation as Democrats appear eager to put as much distance between themselves and him as possible. And now you got Jill going out there going rogue. What do you make of this?
Well, I mean, this is something they can't run away from. I mean,
Right.
whether it's Jill going rogue or not, I mean, the reality is that the Democratic operation around the Bidens lied about Joe Biden and lied to the American public. I can sort of forgive, in some respects, Joe Biden because this is a wife protecting her husband at a time when he's under attack. But the reality is, no, I don't think anybody believes her that she never saw him in a state like that before. But again, I give a little leeway to a wife and her protection of her husband. The problem is it's not just her, it's everybody around Biden who is lying about it. And it's going to continue to be an issue of trust that the Democrats, are going to have a hard time getting across that hurdle.
All right, so let's move past the Bidens here, Rick Gates, and let's move on to this new poll out of Emerson College. This is going to raise some eyebrows. It puts Pete Buttigieg at the top of the list for 2028 contenders, followed closely by Gavin Newsom, then AOC, then Josh Shapiro and Kamala Harris, both there tied at 10%. Andy Bashir also there on that list. Rick Gates, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think when you look at Buttigieg's numbers, they're not significantly increasing. I think the two to watch for were AOC and Andy Bashir. Their numbers jumped the most, and obviously Gavin Newsom's tanked the most. So I think it shows that the Democrats still have no clue who their leader is. They obviously have no messaging. So I think moving forward, it's going to be a much more crowded field than I think people think. But there are also a lot of notables, not on there, Pritzker, Rahm Emanuel, and others. So I think it'll be interesting to see what the primary process does to the overall selection of the Democrats. But look, that entire Emerson poll, not just with the Democratic numbers, but on the issues and in some of the direction of the Democratic Party, I think is great news for Republicans. It shows that the Democrats are still today much weaker, no leadership, no message. Yeah. That's good news.
So, Rick Santorum, this poll also looks at the Republican side, and it showed a huge swing in favor of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He climbed from 9% to 35% between August 2025 and now. Vice President J.D. Vance plummeted from 52% to just 36%. In this, also, you got Governor DeSantis, former Governor Nikki Haley. They're way behind. You know something about running for president on the Republican side. A dead heat between Rubio and Vance. That's a little shocking to me right now.
I don't think it is, candidly. I mean, and Marco Rubio has just become the star of the administration. Obviously, you have Donald Trump, who is the mega star, but as far as everybody else, Rubio is handling, I don't know how many jobs, but certainly the job that he's most adroit at is as Secretary of State, and what he's doing and the level of maturity and calm and focus and discipline. I mean, all of these things are things, candidly, that I think a lot of Republican voters are looking for. They're looking for someone to sort of, be that follow-on to Trump, who is this, figure that just sort of is a disruptive figure, and Americans wanted that and voted for that with Trump. But I think, now they're looking for, okay, what's the follow-on? And Rubio has provided that kind of, impressive stability of someone who really knows what they're doing.
So, Rick Gates, just want to get your take on the Republican side of this poll. Should someone like J.D. Vance be worried?
No, I don't think so at this stage, because look, at this poll, while it showed, across the board, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, what you really want to look for in the primary process is where's the MAGA base? Poll the MAGA base. Are they still behind JD? As that number, decreased and in support more of Marco, for me, that's like the key number, because at the end of the day in this primary process, that's who usually turns out is going to be the base. So where are they? If you look historically over the last year and a half, 2 years, the base has been primarily behind JD, but there's no question that there's been movement by Marco, which I think is a good sign for him. But then, Marco's also said, hey, look, I'm not running, I'm doing my job. And I think that's part of the reason why he's doing so well. He doesn't have, that kind of, burden of thinking I'm running for president at this stage. It may change. So the poll's just a snapshot in time, obviously. So we'll see what happens over the coming months.
Information. truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.